Let me ask you something. Have you ever left a family dinner feeling worse than when you arrived? Not sad, drained, criticized, small. Most of us think that's just family. But a growing body of research says something else. Staying in certain family relationships can actually shorten your life. I'm your host from Life Advice for Older People. We give you the real, research-backed strategies for your golden years that no one else will tell you. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Today, we're talking about the thing no one mentions at Thanksgiving. How many of you have sat through a holiday meal or a weekly phone call and felt worse leaving than when you started? Not because you miss them, but because you feel drained, criticized, made small. We've been taught that feeling is just family. But science is finally catching up to what many of you have suspected for years. Some family relationships are not just annoying, they are physiologically harmful. And the seniors who quietly, or not so quietly, step back from those relationships, they tend to live longer. They report being happier. And today, I'm going to walk you through the evidence, the caveats, and the real-world steps so you can decide for yourself. Let's start with cortisol. That's your body's main stress hormone. A little bit helps you wake up in the morning. Too much, for too long. It's like leaving a faucet dripping onto a wooden floor. Eventually, everything rots. In 2022, researchers at UC Berkeley did something bold. They followed 200 seniors, average age 71, and measured their cortisol levels before, during, and after family interactions. The seniors, who described their family contact as obligatory, meaning I have to, not I want to, had cortisol levels roughly 27% higher than those who had limited or ended contact with consistently draining relatives. Now, here's what that means for your body. Chronic high cortisol shrinks the hippocampus. That's your memory center. It weakens your immune system. It keeps inflammation turned on like a low-grade fever that never really breaks. And here's the kicker. The researchers also compared lonely but peaceful seniors to socially connected but stressed seniors. The lonely ones had better biomarkers. Let that sit with you for a moment. Being alone but calm is healthier for your body than being surrounded by people who make your stress levels spike. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret's daughter called her every Sunday, and every Sunday for 2 hours the daughter would critique Margaret's weight, her housekeeping, her choice to not remarry. Margaret dreaded Sundays. Her blood pressure would start creeping up Friday night. After a mild heart scare, her doctor, not a therapist, her regular doctor, asked, "What's happening on Saturday nights?" Margaret decided to try something radical. She told her daughter, "I love you, but I'm taking 2 months off from our Sunday calls. I'll call you if there's an emergency." Within a few weeks, Margaret noticed she wasn't dreading Sundays anymore. Her sleep improved, and at her next checkup, her blood pressure had come down. Not dramatically, but enough that her doctor asked, "What changed?" She didn't need new medication. She just stopped doing something that was slowly hurting her. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But won't I be lonely? That's the fear society drills into us. And yes, chronic isolation is dangerous. That research is real. But here's what the studies don't always tell you. Toxic contact is often worse than no contact. The University of Chicago's loneliness research found that obligatory socializing, being with people who make you feel unseen, actually increases loneliness because you feel alone in a room full of people. That feeling raises your risk of heart disease more than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So the choice isn't family versus no family. The choice is draining family versus the peace to find your people. And this is where most people get it wrong. They assume that if they pull back from one relative, they'll end up completely isolated. But the data shows the opposite happens over time, because you free up energy to build relationships that actually fill you up. Let's move to happiness, because cortisol is just the beginning. In 2023, the Journal of Gerontology published a longitudinal study, meaning they followed the same 1,500 seniors for 8 years. They looked at one specific group. Seniors who had at least one family relationship they described as consistently critical, demanding, or emotionally draining. Then they watched what happened to the ones who reduced contact with that person versus the ones who kept showing up out of duty. At the 5-year mark, the seniors who reduced contact reported roughly 34% higher life satisfaction. Not just less unhappy, actually happier. And when the researchers dug into why, it wasn't because they suddenly had more family love. It was because they had energy again. Think of your daily energy as a bucket. Every family phone call, every holiday visit, every guilt trip text. That's a scoop out of the bucket. When you're in a draining relationship, you start each day with half a bucket. The seniors who stepped back didn't use that energy to sit alone and cry. They reinvested it. Some picked up hobbies they'd abandoned decades ago because their critical sister always mocked their painting. Others started going to bed at 9 p.m. instead of lying awake rehearsing arguments. Sleep quality improved by about 40% in the first 3 months. That's not selfish, that's reallocation. I can hear some of you now. But what about my grandchildren? That's a fair question, and it's where guilt gets weaponized. The research on grandparent-grandchild relationships is clear. Quality of contact matters far more than quantity. A calm, present grandparent who visits once a month and actually enjoys it has a stronger positive impact than a resentful, exhausted grandparent who shows up every weekend. Your adult child might tell you that you're hurting the kids by pulling back, but look at the data. Children sense tension. They absorb your stress. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a grandchild is to model what healthy boundaries look like. That doesn't mean you never see them. It means you stop using guilt as a reason to stay in a relationship that's slowly breaking you. Now, let's talk about the big one: longevity. The Harvard Adult Development Study is the longest longitudinal study on human happiness ever done, over 80 years following the same men. In 2021, a research team reanalyzed the data specifically for family conflict. They isolated the seniors who had reported a chronically high-conflict family relationship and looked at who lived longest. Now, I need to be careful here. This is a correlation, not a simple cause and effect. But the Harvard researchers found that seniors who stepped back from chronically draining family relationships tended to live, on average, about 5 years longer than those who stayed in high-conflict ties. That doesn't mean cutting someone off guarantees you extra years. It means reducing long-term, unrelenting stress is one of the most powerful things you can do for your health. And sometimes that stress comes from family. The takeaway isn't a magic number. It's that your body keeps score. But this only applies to a specific kind of relationship. Not every conflict, not every rough patch. The research focused on relationships that were chronically high conflict and unilaterally draining. That means you've tried to fix it. The other person isn't willing to change, and the relationship consistently leaves you feeling smaller, not stronger. Here's a simple test. If seeing this person makes you feel anxious, exhausted, or worthless more than 80% of the time, science suggests that stepping back is protective. If it's 50-50, that's a rough patch. That's a different conversation. When people hear "cut off," they often imagine a dramatic door slam. Most seniors don't do that. Most do one of 3 things. Type 1, the soft cut. You reduce frequency. Holidays every year becomes every 2 years. Weekly calls become monthly. You stop doing caregiving labor for able-bodied adult children. You say, "I love you, but I'm no longer available for criticism about my life choices." This is the most common and the least guilt-ridden. Type 2, the firm cut. No in-person contact, but maybe a brief email on birthdays. This is for verbal abuse, financial exploitation, or chronic invalidation. Example, an 82-year-old man whose son kept borrowing his pension. He stopped answering the door, and his savings lasted 3 years longer. Type 3, the sealed cut. Complete cessation, sometimes with legal protection like restraining orders or elder abuse filings. Rare, but valid for severe abuse or ongoing danger. So, what do you actually say to someone? You don't need a dramatic speech. Try this. "I love you, but I'm not going to keep doing that specific thing. If you bring it up again, I'll end the conversation. I hope you can respect that." Or simpler, "I need to take some time for myself. I'll reach out when I'm ready." You don't owe anyone a 20-minute explanation. Short, clear, and then you follow through. And if they push back, if they yell, "guilt you," or call you selfish, that's actually useful information. It tells you that your boundary was necessary. Now, let's talk about the guilt, because that's the part that stops most people. Before you change anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Write them down. Sit with them for a week. Question 1. Have I tried clear communication of my needs at least twice? Not hinting, not sighing. Actual words. When you do X, I feel Y. I need Z. If you've never said it clearly, start there. But if you have, and nothing changed, that's data. Question 2. Is the other person willing to change their behavior even slowly? Look for effort, not promises. A daughter who still criticizes but catches herself and apologizes, that's change. A son who says, "That's just how I am," that's a closed door. Question 3. If a close friend described this relationship to me, would I tell them to stay? This is the magic question. We give friends permission we deny ourselves. Be your own friend for 60 seconds. And here's a ritual that actually helps. Write the letter you will never send. Pour everything onto the page, the anger, the sadness, the "how could you?" Don't edit, don't mail it. Burn it, tear it up, or lock it in a drawer. Then record a voice memo to yourself. Say, "What I'm actually losing is," then say, "What I'm losing in theory is." Most people realize they're losing a fantasy of what the relationship could be, not the reality. Then wait 30 days before finalizing any permanent change, but during those 30 days, track your energy every evening on a 1 to 10 scale. If your average energy goes up by even 2 points, you have your answer. And one more thing, because I know some of you are thinking it. What if I'm the problem? That's a fair question. If multiple people have pulled away from you, it's worth an honest look in the mirror. But if it's one specific relationship that leaves you feeling small and you've tried to fix it, the science still applies. This isn't about blame. It's about patterns. And patterns can change from either side. Cutting off toxic family is not isolation. It's reallocation. And the most successful seniors use what I call the 5-to-1 rule. For every 1 family member you limit, actively add 5 new social connections. Not 5 best friends overnight. 5 connections. That could be a neighbor you say hello to every morning, a volunteer shift at the library, a weekly chair yoga class, an online writing group, 1 person from your place of worship. You're not replacing family. You're diversifying your emotional portfolio. Take Carlos, 75 years old, adult son with addiction issues. For years, Carlos paid his son's rent, bailed him out, lost sleep. Finally, with a therapist's help, Carlos stopped enabling. He said, "I love you, but I will not pay your bills anymore." 3 weeks of heavy guilt. Then he joined a hiking club through his local senior center. Now he has a dozen friends who check on him, no money required. They don't need his money. They need his stories, his cooking, his company. Carlos told me, and I'm paraphrasing, "I didn't lose a son. I gained a dozen friends. And my real son? He's still struggling. But I'm alive to be here if he ever truly wants help." Here's the part that surprises everyone. At the 2-year follow-up of the Harvard study, the seniors who cut off family reported less loneliness, not more. Why? 2 reasons. First, they no longer experienced that alone in a crowded room feeling at family gatherings. Second, their actual alone time became restorative. No more anticipatory anxiety before a visit, no more replaying arguments at 3 in the morning. Sometimes you have to empty your life of the wrong people to make space for the right ones, and sometimes the right one is just you. So what do you do today? Not next month. Today. Number 1, the 10-minute audit. Grab paper. Write down every family member you interacted with in the last month. Next to each name, rate 1 to 10. How did I feel after versus before? Circle anyone below a 4. Number 2, the trial run. For one person below 4, reduce contact by about half for 30 days. Not 0, half. Then track your sleep, your patience with strangers, your small joys. Number 3, the permission slip. Say this out loud, right now. My peace is not negotiable. Say it again. One more time. If any of this is resonating, and I suspect it is, a simple like helps others find this video. And if you subscribe, you won't miss the follow-up where we walk through exactly how to have that first conversation. Next video, why your adult children might secretly want you to cut them off. It's not what you think. And leave a comment, just 1 word if you want. Peace. Or tell me about a relationship you've been reconsidering. I read them. Take care of yourself. You've earned